What's up, guys? It's Ian here, back with the weekly training roundup with Voiceover for the week of February 28th, 2022. My first workout of this week is actually falling on Tuesday, March 1st. I started out my warm-ups with one set of bar supports. This is just where you hold support and then let your body slouch down a little bit and then go back up into the support position. You can think of this exercise as kind of the opposite of a trap shrug. This exercise is essentially warming up the serratus anterior, the triceps, a lot of the small muscles around the shoulder blades, and it's also helping you develop the awareness of the shoulder blade position that you will want to maintain when you're performing the weighted dip. Today's primary exercise was the weighted dip. I warmed up with one set of those support shrugs and then 3 sets of bodyweight dips because it was pretty cold today. After that, I got a warm-up set with a 45-pound plate on the belt, and then I hit my top set with 90 pounds on the belt for a total weight of 227 pounds, which was equivalent to 87.5% of my 1 repetition max on dips. After that top single on the weighted dip, I moved on to my volume work, 3 sets of 6 repetitions on the weighted dip with 190 pounds or 72.5%. This worked out to 55 pounds on the belt. Overall, these felt pretty good. I took an entire week off instead of a deload week. I can't really call last week a deload. I actually just took the whole week off, which in retrospect was quite lazy of me. Probably resulted in a greater decline of fitness than would have if I had done even very mild exercise. Honestly, I just wasn't feeling very good. My motivation was very low. Realistically, I would have probably fared much better this week and in this next training cycle if I hadn't taken that entire week off. But either way, it's not the end of the world. It's not such a big deal. I'm sure the fitness will return fairly quickly. Today did feel harder than it had to because I did take that entire week off as opposed to doing easy exercise. If you take anything away from this video, on your deload weeks, definitely do some easy exercise. You will thank yourself later. Don't go too hard, but on average, doing some easy exercise is much better than doing nothing. There will be times, maybe a couple weeks, a year, where it can be beneficial to take an entire week off if you're really feeling super burnt out. I'm not sure that was the case for me here. Maybe it was, but either way, I think I could have fared better if I had taken a deload as opposed to just a week off. After my volume work on weighted dips, I performed 4 sets of 8 repetitions on bodyweight pull-ups. My bodyweight represents 70% of my estimated 1 repetition max. Sets of 8 are roughly 4 reps away from failure, placing sets of 8 on the overhand grip pull-up just inside of that effective rep range for me. As of right now, it seems like the consensus for effective reps is being roughly within 5 repetitions of failure or 5 reps or closer away from your max rep amount. I'm sure details regarding the actual science behind effective rep models still have to be fleshed out more, as one of the main flaws is that essentially most research studies will either look into multi-joint movements or single joint movements, and on average it's a lot easier to take single joint movements closer to failure. So in my own practice, I do tend to stay a bit further away from failure with my compound movements, aside from max rep testing or 1 rep max testing type of weeks, which are used very sparingly, I should note. But my single joint or isolation type exercises, I feel comfortable taking a lot closer to failure much more regularly, as I feel the recovery toll associated with taking your single joint or isolation type exercises closer to failure is much lower. So in less complicated terms, on average, I like to keep my compound movements, my multi-joint movements a bit further away from failure, and I like to take my single joint isolation style exercises closer to failure. Although there are caveats to both of those, sometimes I will do max rep sets on the compound movements, sometimes I will do 1 rep maxes, but those are not regular occurrences. After my 4 sets of 8 repetitions on the bodyweight pull-ups, I moved on to my steady state cycles. Today, for the advanced tuck front lever, I performed my 1 minute of steady state cycle hold time across 3 sets. I may have accumulated slightly over 1 minute of hold time on this exercise, but in any event, it was pretty close to 1 minute. These felt fine. I'm really just focusing on trying to maintain a firm grip, keeping the shoulder blades depressed, and kind of trying to retract them a little bit. Not an extreme amount of retraction, but just roughly bringing them into a neutral position. And the most important thing is just keeping the elbows straight, abs tight, and shoulders depressed here. After my front lever practice, I moved on to my steady state cycle holds for the tuck planche. Today for the tuck planche, I accumulated my 1 minute of hold time over the course of 3 sets of 20 seconds each. This felt pretty good overall. Not too much to say about it really. Pushing down hard through those hands, I'm trying to keep the shoulders depressed depressed and also protracted. This is going to result in the desired upper back position and also the desired hip height. In my footage from 2 weeks ago on the tuck planche, I was realizing that as I got fatigued, my hips started to sink a bit too low, lower than they're supposed to be in this exercise. So today I was really focusing on keeping my hips at the height they were supposed to be. I accomplished this by pushing down hard through the hands, keeping the shoulders depressed and protracted, and then keeping the abs tight, and also just being aware of the hip height as well. After finishing all of my steady state cycles, I moved on to dumbbell curls. I performed 4 sets of 10 repetitions on the dumbbell curl, one arm at a time, right arm, left arm style. In some of the sets, you might note that I have my hand on my back. The reason why it's there is that I'm trying to keep my glutes pretty tight during this exercise, so I'm focusing on squeezing the glutes and the abs as I'm doing these curls. My hand is kind of on the upper butt area just to make sure that the hip stays locked out. I feel like if I relax the glutes on the curls, I have a tendency to use a bit too much hip extension to kind of swing that weight up, especially as I get fatigued. My body is subconsciously trying to find ways to make the exercise easier. I am aware that as the weight used increases, you may actually have to unlock the hip joint just to maintain balance and not tip over forwards or back or side to side. But in this case, the weight that I'm using wasn't very heavy, so I am focusing on keeping the hip locked out the entire time, keeping the abs tight, really moving around that elbow joint, using a strict technique to really get the most out of this weight since I don't have very heavy dumbbells at home. I'm trying to use a firm grip and then let the weight down slightly slower than I'm bringing it up. So for me, on average, my goal is to have the concentric or up portion of the exercise be a little bit faster than the eccentric or down portion of the exercise. I'm sure that if you look at all of my reps, this is not necessarily true, as there are a lot of repetitions performed and there's definitely inter-rep variability. That's normal, but I'm just saying that's what I'm thinking about, and that's a good general practice to try to get the most out of your exercises if hypertrophy is your goal and your goal isn't simply just to lift the most weight. If your goal is simply to lift the most weight, then the most desired technique can change, and maybe it's not ideal for you to go slower in the eccentric portion of your exercises, but if your goals are somewhat hypertrophy oriented, you can consider going a little bit slower on the eccentric or down portion of some of your exercises, a little bit quicker on the up portion, and this may allow you to generate a similar hypertrophy response with less weight, which in theory may slightly reduce injury risk, although acute to chronic workload probably plays a bigger role in reducing injury risk than absolute weight, although absolute load does play some role in injury risk. There's a lot more people who get injured under really, really heavy weights than people who are just starting out with really light weights. On average, it's probably harder to hurt yourself with entry-level weights. Use an example, for instance, people who are squatting 800 pounds. The number of injuries or tweaks or strains per repetition of 800-pound squats is probably a higher incidence than the number of injuries for lifters who are squatting 135 pounds, right? Not only does acute to chronic workload matter, but I do feel like the absolute weight used does have some influence on injury risk. So using tempo on some of your exercises can help. I'm kind of just discussing general broad view science stuff here, but if I was to coach an individual and they were just like, I want big arms, what do I do? Yeah, I'd say incorporate some of these tempo techniques when you're curling. Definitely still increase the weight that you're lifting over time, but there are things that you can do to get the most out of less weight. On certain exercises like curls or lateral raises, you'll hit a point where you're unable to add more weight much sooner than you would on an exercise like a weighted dip, weighted pull-up, squat, deadlift. Those exercises are going to continue to go up and up and up for a long time in your training career. Certain exercises like curls and delt raises, they just won't go up as quickly as some other exercises. They will go up in a linear fashion to a certain point, but then you'll find that the plateau comes a lot sooner, and no matter how jacked or muscular you get, the amount of weight that an individual can strict curl will reach kind of a lifetime plateau much sooner than other compound multi-joint exercises. That was a lot of talk about curling. Overall, curls were good. Lateral raises were also good. You can see I walked around the room a little bit just to show you different angles of how I like to do the lateral raises. This is an exercise where I do really like to have a mirror. I like having mirrors when I'm doing lateral raises just to ensure that I'm bringing both of the dumbbells to roughly the same height. It's not as easy to sense the end position as it is with curls, because I feel like with curls, You just get your elbow to roughly the same position. You sense roughly the same angle at the elbow joint and keep everything else pretty constant, and your curls are going to be pretty constant with or without a mirror. This is another kind of general point, but on average, it does seem like lifters can get a better mind-muscle connection on their isolation or single joint exercises when they have access to a mirror to kind of look at themselves or view the working muscle as they're training it. Some multi-joint exercises can benefit from mirrors, but on average, a lot of strength athletes actually don't use mirrors when they're performing their multi-joint exercises. Just because there's more going on, you don't want as much distraction. With a lot of professional Olympic weightlifters, they won't even have mirrors in their weightlifting halls. But when you see a bodybuilding gym, it's always full of mirrors, and you kind of want to see yourself as you're training, look at the muscles you're training. Is this improving? Is it not? What can I do about it? And so forth. There's a lot of anecdote there, and it's hard to study these types of things because there could be some inherent risk of performing certain exercises while looking in mirrors, right? It can distract you a little bit if there's something happening. It does take your focus off of the exercise at hand to some extent. So it is a difficult thing to study, but I think on average, a lot of strength athletes tend to not use mirrors on their primary or competitive exercises, and a lot of bodybuilders do tend to have gyms full of mirrors for whatever reason. After those lateral raises, I just performed band tricep pushdowns to band face pulls. These were pretty good. On some of the sets of tricep pushdowns, I would hold the end position for a second or so at the bottom of the range of motion, and on some of the sets, I would just have a faster turnaround, trying to do those overspeed eccentrics. In short, overspeed eccentrics is a term popularized by Louis Simmons. It's a form of eccentric training that maximizes strength gains via the accumulation of kinetic energy, somewhat similar to plyometric training. I'll probably go more in depth on it in the future if you want, but it is something that you can accomplish with band tricep pushdowns in a fairly safe manner. I'd say it's a lot safer than letting go of a cable stack quickly, because when you let the band go, by the time the hands are in the up position and the elbows are bent, there's not really much force being produced by the band, so you're at much lower risk of injury than you would be if you were to just let a cable attachment be pulled up very quickly, because the cable attachment is exerting even force on you throughout the whole range of motion, so you don't want to let a cable attachment go quickly, but you can let the band up a little bit faster, and it's relatively safe to do, especially compared to free weights or cables. So I'll probably talk about that more at a later date. This segment has already gone pretty long. Band face pulls today, I felt comfortable pulling them to kind of nose height or chin height. The point of contact on the face is really going to depend on how high you're kneeling or standing, where the anchor point is, all of those factors, and how far apart your hands are as well. All of those are going to play a role in the height that you're contacting your face with the band. With a full loop band, you're probably going to have a slightly different contact point than you would with a band with two handles or with a tricep rope attachment. Whether the rope attachment is attached to a band or a cable, having the two individual handles will probably result in a slightly different contact point than a full loop band, so also be aware of that. So that brings us to the end of the exercises for day one. After finishing all the exercises, I performed a cool down. I filmed it from the side just so you can see my weight distribution. As you can see, my hips are a little bit behind where the knees are as I'm kneeling. These are just some wrist stretches, very commonly performed by gymnasts, so if you're also into calisthenics, it might make sense to incorporate some of these. But you can see that my center of mass is pretty far back. I'm not putting all my weight on my wrists because the wrists are full of tiny bones and more delicate structures, relatively speaking, so you don't want to put a ton of weight onto them, especially in this bent or somewhat compromised position. You want to put a very measured amount of pressure onto your wrists as you're stretching them here. Use finesse, apply light pressure, very gradually add pressure as you feel that it's needed, but you're definitely not trying to put your entire body weight. My hips are behind the knees, and I'm just putting a little bit of weight on the wrists. I like to start with the palms down. You can go between the fingers forward, fingers in, fingers out, fingers towards you. With the fingers forward and towards you, you're going to be leaning basically slightly away from the fingers, just trying to stretch the wrist flexors in this position. When the fingers are pointed in or out, you're basically leaning side to side very slightly, also stretching the wrist flexors. And then you can see in the second half of this stretching sequence, I get on the backs of the hands and I'm kind of stretching the wrist extensors. Same concept generally. I'm on the backs of the hands. When the fingers are pointed in or out, you can lean very slightly side to side. When the fingers are pointed forwards or towards you, you can lean backwards or forwards just to stretch those those wrist extensors a little bit. On average, I'd say that I put less weight onto the wrists when I'm stretching the extensors than I do when I'm stretching the flexors. In both scenarios, this is a pretty light stretch. You're not putting too much weight onto your wrists because, as I said in the beginning, there are a lot of small, delicate structures in the wrists that you don't want to overly stress. These stretches can feel pretty nice, especially if you're performing a lot of exercises that are hard on the wrists. If you've been doing a lot of computer work or cell phone stuff and your wrists feel stressed out, just make sure that your body temperature is warm before you do these. I don't like stretching at all when I'm cold, so I like doing any stretching that I'm going to do at the end of a workout. If you want me to make a standalone video on some stretches that I like to do or on this particular series, I can. I just performed this sequence at the end of the workout, so I thought I would tack it on there just in case anybody was interested. But either way, that brings us to the end of day 1 weekly training roundup for the week of February 28th. Today was March 1st, Tuesday, and I will see you on day 2, which will be this Thursday, March 3rd. Day 2 here. This was my pull-focused day. I started off with chin-ups. I warmed up with 1 set of bodyweight chin-ups. After that, I moved on to a set of chin-ups with an empty dip belt on. After that, I put just a small amount of weight on the loading pin. I believe this was a total of about 20 or 30 pounds. After that, my next warm-up set, I put the 45-pound plate on the loading pin. This is roughly 50 pounds if you include the weight of the dip belt. And then after that, I got my top single on the weighted chin-up today at 87.5% of my estimated 1 repetition max, or a total weight of 201 pounds, roughly 65 pounds added on. After that top single, I performed 3 sets of 6 repetitions for my back down sets on the weighted chin-up. Today, my back down sets were performed at 72.5% with 30 pounds on the belt. After my back down sets on the weighted chin-up, I moved on to my weighted push-ups. Today, I performed 4 sets of weighted push-ups. The first 2 sets, I stayed in a kneeling position between those sets, and on the first 3 sets, I got 8 repetitions. By the 4th set, I only got 6 repetitions, just trying not to push too close to failure. You could argue that maybe I did reach the point of technical failure on that 4th set, and that is why I cut it off early. Didn't want to overdo it. Either way, 4 working sets on weighted push-ups today, 3 sets of 8, and the last set, I just got 6 reps to keep it comfortable. After those weighted push-ups, I moved on to my steady state cycles. I performed my 1 minute of cumulative steady state cycle advanced tuck front lever holds over the course of 3 sets. My first 2 sets were a bit longer in the 20 to 25 second range, and my 3rd set was about 10 or 15 seconds, and I got my 1 minute there pretty comfortably. These felt pretty good overall, just focusing on the shoulder blade position, keeping the abs tight, all those things. The angle of the lever isn't really that aggressive here, so it may not have the best carryover to the more difficult variations, but it's probably helping a little bit at least. After finishing my advanced tuck front lever steady state cycle holds, I moved on to the tuck planche steady state cycle holds. Today, I performed my 1 minute of steady state cycle hold time in 3 sets of roughly 20 seconds each. These felt pretty good overall, really just focusing on pushing down through those hands, trying to keep the shoulder blades depressed and protracted, feeling this exercise in the serratus anterior, trying to keep the abs tight and maintain that good quality hip height. It's really easy to let the hips sink down and lose the desired hip height. The goal here is really just to keep the hips level with the shoulders. It can be hard to evaluate in real time. That's why it can be good to have a mirror set up or record yourself. Even if you're not going to post the video, it can be good just to have feedback so you're aware of what might need improvement or if it is looking good. After I finished those steady state cycle holds for the tuck planche, I moved on to loading pin curls. 4 sets of 10 repetitions here. I performed my first 3 sets with just the normal pipe and Velcro setup. On the 4th set, I experimented with the tricep rope, kind of more of a hammer curl style of hand-forearm orientation, just to see if I liked it. It was okay. I think I still do prefer the straight bar version, but it can occasionally be good to rotate between handles. I'm a big proponent of changing up handles over time just to stress slightly different structures and avoid overuse injuries. Either way, I still do like these loading pin curls a lot. I think it's a worthwhile exercise to perform if you're training at home, as it's pretty hard to set up cable curls at home unless you have a pulley mounted to the floor or a dual pulley type of setup. It is pretty hard to do cable curls at home. I find that loading pin curls feel very similar to cable curls, and in a gym, cable curls are one of my favorite curling variations, so I definitely recommend giving these loading pin curls a try if you haven't tried them yet and you do have a loading pin and a rope and a handle lying around. Go ahead and give them a try. Let me know down in the comment section below below if you do like them. Either way, and hopefully you like them. After my 4 sets of loading pin curls, I moved on to cable tricep pushdowns. I performed 4 sets of cable tricep pushdowns today. These were pretty good. I'm definitely appreciating the fact that I set up the cable pulley so that I can do this exercise standing. It was a bit of an ordeal to perform it kneeling. I feel like performing it standing is really making me feel like I'm at a gym again, even though I'm just at home in my kitchen. I do tend to like doing them with the bent hip position, so I'm locking in that position, knees slightly soft, shins are vertical, hips are back a little bit, kind of like a stiff leg deadlift type of position almost. Back is in a nice neutral position, elbows are under the shoulders for me, and then I'm just moving about that elbow joint, bringing my hands until they're beneath the elbows and the shoulders as well. If you have a long rope and you're doing this exercise, you can also experiment pulling the hands a little bit further back too. You can keep the upper arm in line with your body. This will also put additional stress on your tricep with a limited amount of external load or weight. So try out this variation. If you are training at home and you have limited weight, it can help you get more effect out of a moderate weight. I'll probably make a standalone video on the 3 different types of tricep pushdown technique that I typically do. One of them being elbows under shoulders, hands under the elbows, the other one being hands more in the front, and then the third one being upper arm more in alignment with the body and the hands finishing a bit behind the elbows. All 3 are perfectly valid. There's pros and cons to each one, and I probably will make a standalone video on that just so it's easier to find. I know this is an exercise that has a lot of confusion surrounding it because of the fact that so many different people just perform it in different ways. After my 4 sets of cable tricep pushdowns, I just performed a few ab exercises and I finished up the workout. Overall, it was a good day. The weighted chin-ups went well, weighted push-ups went well, steady state cycles going well, still enjoying the loading pin curls and the cable tricep pushdowns. Overall, this was a successful workout. Day 3 here. This is my calisthenics bodyweight only day with more of the difficult skill work and no weighted calisthenics. I started things off with 2 sets of 10 repetitions on the push-up on rings. This is a good medium difficulty exercise for me, and it also helps me warm up for the more difficult exercises. Nothing too stressful about this exercise to the point where I just can't start off with it, kind of treat it as a warm-up, but it's also hard enough that there's probably some effective reps here. A bit of stimulus in terms of creating a hypertrophy response. So this exercise isn't so easy that it's useless, and it's not so hard that I need to do an extensive warm-up before it, so it's a great first exercise of the workout type of movement for me, at least. After my 2 sets of push-up on rings, I moved on to my 2 sets of 5 on the rings turned out push-up. Still really liking this exercise. It fits nicely in this body weight only day where there's no additional weight added to the body. This is a difficult exercise in terms of body weight only exercises for me currently, and I definitely recommend trying it out if you're getting to a point where the normal ring push-up is starting to feel a bit easy and you want something harder. Maybe you don't have extra weight to add on. These rings turned out push-ups can be a great option to make your push-up slot a little bit more difficult, and it doesn't mean to neglect your normal push-ups. You can perform those as a higher repetition exercise, and you can slot in these rings turned out push-ups in a more difficult exercise slot at some other point in the workout or some other point in the training week. I think both exercises are good, and there's certainly pros and cons to each exercise, with neither being outright better than the other. Just the rings turned out push-up is more difficult rep for rep. You can't really perform as many repetitions, and the regular ring push-up you can get a lot more repetitions in, and it's more suitable as kind of a high repetition volume exercise. After those rings turned out push-ups, I moved on to my ring dip to ring turned out support. These were going pretty well today. I was just really focusing on getting my shoulder blades all the way depressed at the top, trying to dial in that rings turned out support position. It's kind of hard to get the rings turned out as far as I would like, just because I'm training in a doorway here, and the rings do kind of run into the doorway, and they damage the doorway, make a lot of noise. When I do get into that full ring turned out rings to the sides of the body, once the weather gets a little bit better, I'll go to the park more often. 2 weeks ago, I did mention that my shoulder was feeling a bit funny. That might have honestly been because of the weather. It's a bit cold outside. It's probably still a bit too cold to train outside, but once it gets warmer, I'll probably attempt to train outside a bit more often. I just don't want to incur increased injury risk because it is so cold outside. It's not too suitable to train outside just yet. To put it in perspective, it's not brutally cold out in the Bay Area right now. An average day is ranging from, I'd say, 55 to 60 degrees. not that cold, but it's not warm either. I'm pretty lean, not in like a pretentious way, but my cold resistance is pretty low. And honestly, if we have like a drastic famine or something, having a little bit of extra fat is actually a beneficial adaptive trait. I could talk a lot about that. That doesn't have too much to do with fitness, the topic at hand. So after those ring dips to ring turned out supports, I moved on to my band assisted straddle planche. I only performed one set of this today. It was pretty good overall. I think in the future, I might experiment with even more band assistance. That means using a heavier band to allow myself to hold this position for a bit more time. I'm thinking that maybe I just need more exposure to this position, and with the current level of band assistance, maybe I'm just not getting enough time in this position. After that one set of band assist straddle planche, I moved on to the advanced tuck planche. I performed 3 sets of this exercise today, so this was my main volume slot for the planche practice today. The advanced tuck, still pretty difficult for me. Maybe there's an argument for doing a light band assist on this exercise even just to get a really long hold time. I haven't done this exercise with a band assist ever, but maybe some degree of band assist could be useful. I guess I just haven't really considered it in the past. But one thing for sure is that I think in the future I might experiment with a bit more band assistance on the straddle planche just to give myself a bit more time in that position and increase my chances of one day getting it unassisted. After all of my planche practice, I moved on to 2 sets of 10 repetitions on bodyweight chin-ups. I think some of the repetitions I was going a little bit too fast on the way up and down. Maybe I was getting a little bit anxious or bored, it's hard to say. I think my concentration wasn't really on point. Either way, 2 sets of 10 here, pretty easy. Although even 2 sets of 10 on bodyweight chin-ups can be difficult if you go slowly enough on the way down. I feel like chin-ups are definitely the type of exercise where a lot of people kind of rush the down portion. I was guilty of that on this day here, on some of the repetitions at least. But with chin-ups, you can really get a lot more out of them if you use control on the way down. Go a little bit slower, and you'd be surprised at how difficult even bodyweight chin-ups are if you go slowly on the way down. After my 2 sets of 10 repetitions on the chin-ups, I moved on to my front lever practice. So I used those chin-ups as a bit of a warm-up to warm up the lats, and after I moved on to my half lay front lever holds. I performed 2 sets of the half lay today. They felt pretty good overall, considering I'm coming off of a week off, not even a deload, a week of no training. The half lays were alright. I feel like maybe on the second set there's a little bit of hip hike, but overall I'd say these were acceptable, and I'm just going to aim to improve them even more going forward. After my 2 sets of half lay, I tried to perform 1 set of a straddle. It didn't go too well, so I decided for my last 2 sets of front lever practice today to just perform the kind of frog straddle that I talk about a lot. It's in between the advanced tuck and the actual straddle. I don't know what it is, but the straddles have been feeling really hard for me recently. The half lays have been feeling a little bit easier. Maybe I'm splitting my knees a little bit too much when I do the half lays, and that's making it easier than it should be. It's hard to say. Maybe I just got weaker. Remains to be seen. I probably have to dial in my sleep and nutrition a little bit more, but overall, I do feel like I am stringing together some productive training, and that's what's important to me, I guess. After that front lever practice, I performed 3 sets of the advanced tuck front lever body row. I performed 3 sets of 5 repetitions on this exercise today. I think for me, the biggest key to this exercise is not rocking around, but just pulling myself until I feel like I come to a natural stopping point. It might seem like the range of motion is a bit short on this exercise, but to me, this is a lot more comfortable than kind of rocking forwards and back just to get a little bit higher on the bar. I feel like for me here, this is the most comfortable technique. Maybe in the future, once I get stronger at this exercise, I might experiment performing this with a false grip and trying to pull myself higher, closer to the pull-up bar. But for now, that's just not comfortable for me. So I just pull until my elbows seem to come to their natural stopping point, and that seems to be the most comfortable technique for me on these advanced tuck front lever body rows. After my 3 sets of 5 there, I performed 2 more sets of 10 repetitions on the bodyweight chin-up. This finished up the workout, so I did 4 sets of bodyweight chin-ups in total. The first 2 sets came before my front lever practice, kind of as a warm-up, kind of also as a bit of volume training. The last 2 sets came at the end of the workout after my front lever practice, because I know that I can still do 2 sets of 10 on bodyweight chin-ups after everything else. Even if I'm a bit fatigued, I can still do these. Whereas if I was to do all 4 sets of the bodyweight chin-ups earlier in the workout, it might impact my front lever training and the advanced tuck body rows negatively. So that's why I organized it in that manner. I know that I can get the chin-ups done even if I'm a bit fatigued. Whereas if I did all the chin-ups in the beginning, it might impact my front lever training more negatively. If I was going to be doing weighted chin-ups and treat it as a primary exercise, I would put all of the chin-ups at the beginning of the workout just because it doesn't make sense to split it up. But with bodyweight chin-ups, it's very convenient, and logistically it does make sense to split them up for me just because the first set's more like a warm-up. The last sets are split off so they don't impact the rest of the workout with unwanted fatigue. So that's the end of the workout. This was the weekly training roundup with voiceover for the week of February 28th, 2022. This Monday was the last day of February. The workout week really started on March 1st, and then I worked out Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So that's where those 3 days fell. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you have any comments or questions, drop a comment in the comment section below. If you have any specific video requests, definitely also drop a comment below. I've seen some of the other video requests, and I will be working on them when I get some time. I haven't forgotten them. They're on my list, and I will get to them. Either way, thank you for watching this video, and until next time, don't let anybody stop your gains.